Fort Worth, Texas. A quiet summer evening in June 2022 shattered by a frantic 911 call. A man's voice, urgent and filled with pain. "We shot each other," he gasps. On the other end of the line, dispatchers scramble to make sense of the unimaginable. Police rush to the scene, sirens piercing the night air, knowing that time is running out. When they arrive at the house on Wheatland Drive, the sight inside is beyond tragic. "39-year-old Shannon Michelle Lacey is lifeless. Gunshot wounds to her head, leaving no chance for survival. Nearby, her husband, Jessic DeJuan Lacey Jr., barely clings to life, his torso riddled with bullets. Paramedics move quickly, rushing him to the hospital. He makes it through surgery. But the battle isn't over. As the days pass, hope fades. 10 days later, he takes his last breath. What happened inside the house? A domestic dispute turned deadly. But was it that simple? Who fired first? Was this an accident or something far more deliberate? The story of Shannon and Jessic Lacey is not just about one tragic night. It's about everything that led up to it. Their pasts, their struggles, their final moments. To understand their deaths, we must first understand their lives. Shannon was a mother of 3, a woman who worked tirelessly to provide for her children. By all accounts, she was strong, independent, and determined. But beneath that resilience, there was strain. She worked 2 jobs, often exhausted, carrying the weight of financial responsibilities on her shoulders. Her husband, Jessic, had dreams of making it as a singer. Music was his passion. But passion alone doesn't pay the bills. Their home was one of love, but also of tension. Tension that would eventually reach a breaking point. This is their story. Before the tragic night that claimed her life, Shannon Michelle Lacey was a woman defined by resilience. She was more than a name in the headlines. She was a mother, a provider, and a fighter. Her life had been shaped by challenges, but she never allowed them to define her. Shannon had 3 children from a previous relationship. Their father was no longer in the picture, leaving her to raise them on her own. The responsibility was immense, but she refused to let them go without. Every decision she made, every hour she worked, every sacrifice she bore, it was all for them. She took pride in being the one they could rely on, the one who made sure they had food on the table, clothes on their backs, and a sense of stability in a world that often felt unpredictable. Raising 3 children alone wasn't easy. The weight of single parenthood bore down on her, but she refused to break. She juggled 2 jobs, each one demanding, each one necessary to keep her household running. The long hours drained her, but exhaustion was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her days started before the sun rose and stretched long into the night. But when she walked through the door, she put on a brave face for her children. No matter how tired she was, she made time for them. She helped with homework, listened to their stories, and did her best to ensure that, despite the struggles, they never felt the full burden she carried. Those who knew Shannon described her as strong-willed, determined, and fiercely devoted. She wasn't the type to complain or seek pity. She had made peace with her reality and did what needed to be done. But behind her strength was a woman who was stretched thin. The constant pressure of bills piling up, the loneliness of doing it all on her own, the dream she had set aside for the sake of survival. It all weighed heavily on her. She wanted more, a stable home, a supportive partner, a life where she didn't feel like she was fighting every single day just to stay afloat. And then came Jessic. At first, he seemed like exactly what she had been waiting for. A man who could stand by her side, offer love and companionship, and maybe, just maybe, ease the burden she had carried alone for so long. Their love story started like many others, full of hope, promise, and the belief that together they could build something lasting. But love alone is never enough, and for Shannon, the dream of a perfect family would soon clash with the harsh realities of life. Jessic DeJuan Lacey Jr. had always believed he was destined for something greater. Music was his passion, his escape, his purpose. He had spent years chasing the dream of making it as a singer, convinced that if he could just get the right opportunity, everything would fall into place. His voice carried emotion. His performances were filled with energy, and he saw himself as someone who would one day make a name in the industry. But dreams, no matter how deeply held, do not always translate into reality. While Shannon was grinding away at 2 jobs to support her children, Jessic was investing his time in his music. He wasn't completely idle. He performed when he could, worked on his craft, and networked with anyone who might help him break into the industry. But his pursuit of success didn't come with a steady paycheck. It didn't pay the rent, put food on the table, or contribute to the household in the way Shannon needed. For Jessic, the idea of settling for an ordinary job felt like giving up on everything he had worked for. He didn't want to be another man clocking into a 9-to-5, coming home exhausted, and let his dreams fade into the background. He had seen it happen to others, and he refused to let it happen to him. But as the months passed, the tension between ambition and responsibility grew. When Jessic became part of Shannon's life, he also stepped into the role of a stepfather to her 3 children. It was not an easy transition. They had already been through the pain of losing their biological father's presence, and now there was a new man in their home, one who wasn't their dad but was expected to act as a parental figure. Some days they embraced him. Other days they kept their distance. Jessic tried to connect with them in his own way. He wanted them to see him as more than just their mother's partner. He wanted to be someone they looked up to, someone they could trust. There were moments when it seemed like they were forming a bond. He would play music for them, show them how to create beats, and talk to them about chasing their own dreams. In those moments, he felt like he belonged. But when tensions flared between him and Shannon, the distance between him and the children grew wider. Shannon, exhausted from carrying the financial burden alone, had begun to see his dream differently. What once seemed admirable now felt like an excuse. She had supported him, encouraged him, believed in him. But as time passed and their struggles deepened, her patience wore thin. She needed help, and no matter how much Jessic promised that things would get better, she couldn't ignore the reality that they weren't. Their home became a battlefield of unspoken resentment. Jessic, feeling misunderstood and unappreciated, withdrew into his music, while Shannon, overwhelmed and tired, began questioning if this relationship was truly what she had hoped for. The love they once shared was still there, but it was being buried under financial stress, unmet expectations, and the quiet, lingering fear that this life was not going to turn out the way either of them had imagined. What started as 2 people dreaming of a future together had now become 2 people struggling to stay afloat. And as the pressure built, something had to give. Shannon and Jessic's story began like so many others, full of passion, hope, and the belief that love could conquer anything. When they first met, there was an undeniable spark between them. Shannon, exhausted from years of carrying life's burdens alone, saw in Jessic a man who was full of life, ambition, and charm. He was different from what she had known before. He had dreams, a fire in him that made her feel alive again. Jessic, on the other hand, was drawn to Shannon's strength. She was a woman who knew what she wanted, someone who didn't crumble under pressure. He admired her drive, respected her resilience, and saw her as the kind of person who would stand by his side no matter what. Their love moved quickly, fueled by the idea that together they could build something lasting. For Shannon, Jessic represented companionship, someone who could help her shoulder the emotional weight of her responsibilities. For Jessic, Shannon provided stability, a home, and a sense of belonging. In the beginning, their differences seemed to complement each other. But over time, those same differences began to pull them apart. At first, Shannon supported Jessic's dream. She believed in his talent and wanted to see him succeed. But reality has a way of wearing down even the strongest convictions. As months passed and bills piled up, her patience began to wear thin. She worked long hours at 2 jobs, barely having time for herself, while Jessic spent his days focused on music, hoping for his big break. The financial strain became unbearable. Shannon had envisioned a partner who would stand beside her, help ease the burden, and build a future with her. Instead, she felt like she was doing it all on her own. The arguments started small: comments about money, frustration over unpaid bills, tension over Jessic's lack of income. But small arguments have a way of turning into something much bigger. The more Shannon pushed for stability, the more Jessic felt like he was being forced into a life he didn't want. He didn't want to be like everyone else, grinding away at a job he hated just to make ends meet. He wanted to chase his passion, to hold on to the dream that one day all the sacrifices would be worth it. But to Shannon, it wasn't just about dreams anymore. It was about survival. The fights became more frequent, more intense. And then came the whispers, the quiet suspicions that cut deeper than any financial struggle ever could. Allegations of infidelity began to surface, adding another layer of tension to an already fragile relationship. Shannon started hearing things, seeing things, noticing changes in Jessic's behavior that she couldn't ignore. Late-night phone calls, unexplained absences, moments when his attention seemed to be elsewhere. At first, she tried to push the thoughts away. Maybe she was overthinking. Maybe the stress was getting to her. But doubt has a way of creeping in, poisoning everything in its path. Jessic denied it, of course. He swore that Shannon was imagining things, that she was letting her insecurities cloud her judgment. But trust, once fractured, is hard to repair. The love they had once shared was being buried under resentment, suspicion, and the growing realization that the person they had fallen for was not the person standing in front of them now. Shannon, once so full of hope for their future, began questioning if this relationship was worth fighting for. Jessic, feeling attacked and unappreciated, withdrew further into his music, into his own world. The distance between them grew wider. Nights that were once filled with laughter and shared dreams became silent, tense, and filled with unspoken words. They were no longer the couple who had fallen in love. They were two people living in the same house, but existing in separate worlds. And as the days passed, it became clear that something had to give. The evening of June 1st, 2022, was supposed to be like any other. The sun was setting over Fort Worth, Texas, casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood of Wheatland Drive. Inside the home that Shannon and Jessic shared, the tension that had been simmering for months finally reached its breaking point. What started as an argument quickly escalated. Voices were raised, words were exchanged, words that couldn't be taken back. The walls of their home had heard many fights before, but this one felt different. The frustration, the resentment, the years of financial strain and emotional turmoil had built up like a pressure cooker, and tonight it was about to explode. No one knows the exact words that were said in those final moments. Did Shannon accuse Jessic of betrayal? Did Jessic lash out in anger, feeling misunderstood and cornered? Was it the weight of their collapsing relationship, or had something specific set them off? What is clear is that neither of them saw a way out of the storm they had created together. Then a gun was drawn. The details remain murky, lost in the chaos of that night. Did Shannon reach for the weapon first, fearing for her life? Did Jessic push to his limit, react in desperation? What happened next unfolded in mere seconds, but would change everything forever. Gunshots echoed through the house, piercing through the silence of the evening. The first shot may have been a warning, an attempt to regain control of the situation, but the next ones were different. The bullets found their targets, one after another. Shannon was struck multiple times in the head, her body collapsing onto the floor. Blood pooled around her, the life that had fought so hard for her children now slipping away. Somewhere in the chaos, Jessic was also hit. The impact of the bullet tore through his torso, leaving him gasping for breath, clutching at his wound. Pain spread through his body, but somehow he remained conscious long enough to reach for his phone. At 7 p.m., a desperate call was placed to 911. Jessic's voice was weak, strained, filled with pain and confusion. He told the dispatcher that he and his wife had shot each other. There was no explanation, no details, just a chilling statement that would soon send emergency responders racing to their home. When officers arrived, the sight that awaited them was nothing short of horrifying. Shannon lay lifeless on the floor, the injuries to her head making it clear that there was nothing that could be done for her. The mother who had worked tirelessly to provide for her children, who had endured years of hardship in hopes of a better future, was gone. Jessic was found nearby, barely clinging to life. His wounds were severe, the blood loss extensive. Paramedics worked quickly, stabilizing him as best as they could before rushing him to the hospital. His chances of survival were slim, but for now he was still alive. Neighbors stood outside, watching in stunned silence as officers moved through the scene. A family home had become a crime scene. A relationship that had once been filled with love had ended in a brutal act of violence. And inside that house, among the shattered remnants of their life together, lay the tragic reality of a love story that had gone horribly, irreversibly wrong. Jessic was rushed to the hospital, his body weakened by the gunshot wound that had torn through him. Surgeons fought to keep him alive, but the damage was severe. For 10 days, he lingered in critical condition, slipping in and out of consciousness. Then on June 11th, 2022, his body gave out. The same violence that had taken Shannon had now claimed him as well. Shannon's 3 children, once part of a home filled with both love and conflict, were now left with neither. Their mother, the woman who had worked tirelessly to give them a better life, was gone. Their stepfather, the man who had once tried to be part of their world, had met the same fate. The weight of their loss was unimaginable. In an instant, their lives had changed forever. The news spread quickly, sending shockwaves through the community. Friends, neighbors, and co-workers struggled to make sense of the tragedy. Some blamed the pressures of financial strain. Others pointed to deeper, unspoken wounds within the relationship. But no answer could undo what had happened. The story of Shannon and Jessic became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of how love, when strained by life's pressures, can turn into something unrecognizable. The tragic story of Shannon and Jessic Lacey is more than just an isolated incident. It highlights deeper issues that exist in many relationships. Financial stress, emotional turmoil, and unresolved conflicts can build over time, turning love into resentment and, in some cases, leading to irreversible consequences. How many couples are silently struggling under the weight of these pressures, unaware of how close they are to a breaking point? This case raises important questions. What warning signs should individuals look for to prevent such tragedies? How can communities provide better support for families facing financial and emotional hardships? What resources should be available for those struggling with relationship conflicts before it's too late? Let's open up the conversation. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective could help someone in a similar situation. And if you found this story compelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more true crime stories that need to be told.